I wanted to ask specifically about inflation, because it's going, obviously, a bit crazy, well, not crazy like 1970s, but it's the highest we've had historically in the US and the UK. And I'm wondering if you think maybe it could be a good thing, because it would push employees to have to bargain for wages. And maybe this would kind of reignite that tendency from workers to bargain with employers. I mean, in the UK, I don't know if you've seen, but the governor of the Bank of England went on an interview the other day to tell people don't bargain for higher wages. That's the solution to inflation, according to him. Whereas he makes £500,000 a year, which is like $750,000. But yeah, just wondering, with inflation, do you think that even if it would cut into people's standards of living, and ultimately I'm in favor of material outcomes through politics just as much as you are, but do you think that it could have a positive impact in creating some social conflict, for lack of a better word?
Well, I can tell you this. I mean, just in terms of as a factual matter, inflation has hit most countries around the world, at least in the industrialized world. I think in the United States, depending on how you measure it, maybe a little bit higher. But wages have gone up on the low end of the wage spectrum in this country by 6 or 7%. There is a great paper that that I was reading recently, and it is I think here, get it right here. I just happened to have it on my one of my million things. It is from a whole crew of people about monetary policy and inflation, and essentially there's a theory that what we're experiencing is not true inflation, that it's really a function of the disruption that is caused by COVID in terms of our supply chain. And it has been a lot more durable than I think, at least I suspected it would be. But we still are having, like, you know, random cities in China closing down, like where all the industry happens. And that's going to impact things. We have, you know, weakness in our supply chain.
Gas prices too.
What's that?
Gas prices. I don't know.
Well, gas prices.
In the US,
gas prices have shot up in the past week, and part of that is a function of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Part of that is a function of they had rolled back production because there was this sudden drop off in economic activity during the shutdown, and they haven't ramped back up, and they're taking advantage of this. We should say, like, you know, Exxon and other oil companies are having record profits because of it, right? Because they're working that they're sort of arbitraging the cutback in production and the quicker rebounding of demand. But I think over the long term, two things are going to happen. I think one, and even maybe in the midterm, I mean, I think we're probably a year out, somewhere around there, where you're going to start to see prices fall back down into line as production ramps back up, and we hopefully get past COVID scares. But the wages, I think, are going to remain. And I do think that's going to create tension. And it certainly, in this country, I don't know what's happening in the UK, but in this country, there has been a huge churn in people leaving their low-paying jobs and finding jobs that are paying just a little bit better, or maybe the conditions there are better. And one of the things why I keep pushing back on the narrative that this is regular inflation. I mean, it really, people define it in different ways, but inflation that is a function of demand outpacing.
It's not because of demand.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Demand has shot back up.
Demand.
demand is shot back up. It's just that we artificially halted or cut back on production in some instances because we just had demand just fell off a cliff. It's like, look, if I have a restaurant, okay, and on March 13th, 2020, a week later, nobody shows up at my restaurant. I don't have that much of a margin. I'm gonna fire some of my employees. Maybe I'm gonna fire all of them, or I'm gonna close the restaurant because I don't want to pay rent. But let's say I was able to keep it open with a skeletal crew, or I just do takeout. All of a sudden, demand kicks back in. I've got to basically rebuild my business again. I've got to rebuild waiters. I got to retrain the waiters. I've got to get more. I got to find out where I get more chicken, where I get more lettuce, and all of this. And the place I used to get the lettuce is not working.
A temporary shock.
Yes, and
compared to like a long-term overheating of the economy.
Exactly. And I think the proof.
But do you think that the tension, even if it's short-term, like a year or so, if, say, this temporary inflation goes away, do you think that this could be enough since, in the US, and it's very much the same here in the UK, in fact, we have a massive cost of living crisis. If you look at the news about the UK, it's everywhere. Costs have gone up by like £1,000 to about $1,500 per year per family. And that's just pushed millions into the brink. And I'm guessing with the end of stimulus and government support in the US, if it's the same case, and since a lot of people are feeling the pinch a lot more and inflation happening at the same time, would that push maybe, I don't know, for people to buy? I'm a lot more hopeful about the US than the UK because you've got a lot more activity around unions, I would say, with stuff like Amazon. Whereas here, there's a lot of political apathy.
I should tell you, we have a lot of political apathy here, and
not as much as here.
Well, I don't know. Our unionization is.
I'm French too, and France is okay. People protest and go out on the street and do something when the government says life is gonna get more expensive. But in the UK, and I follow your show all the time, and I follow American politics all the time. You have some reaction from politicians, and we do also in the UK, but there's no popular movements, really. There's not. We've got XR, a few things, but we don't have this. So, I'm a lot more hopeful for what would happen in the US. Obviously, in the UK, we've still got the Conservatives in power, and it's been very depressing, frankly, for many, many years. But that will change.
Yeah, I wish I could share your optimism about this country, to be honest with you. We just had we just had two members of Congress essentially deny the American public child tax credit, which would have been a $300 a month, more or less, for each family.
Joe Manchin in cinema?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But my point is that, extended unemployment benefits, there's still talk in Washington that maybe, they just voted in the House to extend the budget for another month. And there's some talk that maybe there's going to be some additional COVID relief in the budget that they ultimately pass. We're not quite clear on what it would be. It could be something like, paid sick leave or back pay or something to that effect, but not much. And you really don't hear much about it from the American public in terms of even though it had a incredibly positive impact on, child poverty in this country, on the ability for people to say, I'm not going to work this crappy job. I'm going to head over to a different job and take that risk and feel like, it didn't mean they didn't have to work, but it did mean that they felt a little bit more confident in positioning themselves. It's just, the gulf between what our government can and do or does do or won't do and how it impacts individual Americans' lives and their awareness of that is pretty wide, it seems to me, in this country, and that is a problem. And it's a failure of on some level of the politicians who When you pass something like that, you should make the American public be aware of it. And when it fails, you should make the public aware of it. And on some level, I think there's been a failure to do so. But we'll see. I don't know. Well, I don't know what's going to happen.
I think we both. I mean, I think most of the show would agree that the media is responsible in many ways, and I mean.
The media is responsible, but the media is responsible. But the fact is also, if the the media is set up in such a way that they're not going to get out ahead of the Democratic Party in complaining about these things, or they're not going to get out ahead of advocates for it. It's just not the case. And so I agree with you that in a perfect world, the media would be more aggressive about this stuff. But the reality is there is also political players who are bad at what they do in many respects. Appreciate the call.
I know somehow my life's got great.